Hello, my friend. I'm Kiddo, and today I'm going to cover the 3 invisible forces that decide your reseller income. Getting right into things, the first invisible force is going to be repeatability. So, can you reproduce the desired result consistently? So, as much as I would love to get the perfect garage sale haul, as much as I would love to get the perfect DM that alley-oops me a fantastic wholesale deal, ultimately these one-off opportunities, unless they are leading into relationships, unless they are leading to, introductions to suppliers, unfortunately they are not repeatable. So thinking about this hidden force within your business is to think about, how do I make sure that I can do it consistently? How can I reproduce the situation that created this result that I wanted? This doesn't just apply to sourcing. It also applies to the processing aspect as well. So something that I hear a lot is this idea that I'm just going to start listing, 50, 60 a day. If I have your supplier, if I have your source, if I have heaps of items and I buy a whole bunch, that I'm just going to magically, start processing the 50, 60 a day. And then I'm also going to start selling that amount. And unfortunately, and through experience, you'll learn that this is not how it works. Not only does a big store not guarantee the sales, but if you do this too fast, you run the risk of jamming up your cash flow, because it is one thing to process the items, but the other part is also shipping those items and having the market awareness to be able to price those items in a way in which they sell through. Because ultimately you could have a desirable item that is worth $100, but ultimately, even with some of those rarer items, whether it is a $100 item, whether it is a $500 t-shirt, some of these rarer items actually will sit around for a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. Because more often than not, that $500 t-shirt, unless you want to sell it for $300 and move it quickly, if you are trying to sell it for that $500 mark, you have to wait for the right customer. And there may only be a certain amount of people searching for that item, for that $500 t-shirt, and you ultimately have to wait for that sale if you want to max out the price. So with this hidden force of repeatability, first it's considering, is this sourcing consistent? Can I repeat this method? The second is, can I consistently process these items? So can I photograph, list, ship, pack? Can I actually sell those items consistently? Because with some brands, even if you list it under market, there may only be a certain amount of people searching for that item. So that's the other part, is the throughput. You have to be able to not only process it, but sell it through, and then, free up that cash flow to then, personally for me to be able to buy more. I think about the sourcing process. I think, is this method of sourcing sustainable? Can I repeat it? Can I do it again and again? The second part of this is the processing. So even if I want to list 50 of these a day, can I actually clean, photograph, list this? That's going to be very important, the processing. And then the third part, which is probably the most important part, is, can I move it through? Can I actually sell the item so that it comes into the store and then goes out? Because ultimately, if you don't have that third step where the item then goes back out again, what ends up happening is you jam up your cash flow, which I have personally done. And you also create this situation in which, you're not getting the sales and you're just stuck, with the store getting bigger, and you're ultimately not able to sustain that. Repeatability is a hidden force that is super important. We can get lucky. We can get the deal of the lifetime, but ultimately we cannot build our business on chaos. We need to be able to build it on something that is predictable or relatively predictable, so that we can continue to do that. Because ultimately the real returns comes from compounding, comes from establishing those relationships that extend over time. Moving on now to the second invisible force. So this is going to be the utility of time. The way I think about this is, early on in my journey, it took me way longer than it needed to process 30 items a day, to process 20, to process 10 items a day. And then as I got better, that same window of work took less and less time. And this is really important to consider, that as you grow and you evolve and your business gets better and you get better at your business, you are going to improve those processes. You are going to improve the overall system. So the utility of time in year one is going to be drastically different than the utility of time in year 5. In my case, I found that I was much more efficient in year 5 than when I first started at year 1. And that's just the natural progression of things. If I could speak to the younger version of me, the earlier version of me, and just say, hey, look, it's okay that you're wasting time here. It's okay that you're wasting time there. It's okay that maybe you're unaware of wasting this time. But my message to my younger me is, you're going to have to go through that stage. You are going to have to go through those inefficiencies in order to find the route to the efficiency. It took me getting to the point of frustration with a process, whether it was, doing photos on the ground, for example. My back had to be really sore before I looked out and was like, you know what? I need to stop doing photos on the floor. I need to come up with a setup so that I can stand up while I do these photos. And everybody is going to have a different threshold for where that frustration is, where that point is, which actually makes you learn and shift that behavior into the next best version of you that is more efficient. The utility of time speaks specifically on the compression of time. So something that used to take you ages now doesn't take you that long. And compression of time is something that I'm consistently working on. How can I do this thing better? How can I do this thing at the same standard, but do it faster? How can I do it faster and not compromise quality? And ultimately, you do hit that tipping point where, you are trading that quality for time, and then you have to dial it back. So it's not always about doing things faster. For me, it's about creating the results that I want in a more efficient manner. I think in order to get better when it comes to the compression of time, is to really build custom systems that are custom fit to you. Now, when I say this, I mean the smallest things. So for me, it was about adjusting the height of my photography setup. As much as we can watch somebody's YouTube video, as much as you can listen to what I'm saying, I think the number one thing you can take away from this video as it pertains to the utility of time is, if you want to get faster, if you want to get more efficient and have better results, is you need to custom fit and custom tailor your business to you specifically. Whether it is, the height at which you put your photo setup, whether it is the distance away you put your satchels when you're packing. These micro changes ultimately compound and add up. So the more that you can custom build your business to you across every single aspect, custom fit. And this doesn't mean that you have to, disregard and not look at what everybody else is doing. I think that's where you should start. Look at what everybody else is doing, but make sure that you tweak it to you and ultimately focus on custom fitting your system and your processes to you. And that's how you're going to get the best results when it comes to navigating the hidden force that is the utility of time and compressing time. The third and final force, I would say, is hunger. I was thinking about what I was going to call this third one. And I guess it could fall under the umbrella of desire. It could fall under the umbrella of motivation, although that's a tricky one. The reason why I called it hunger is because it is so easy to tell who has the hunger and who does not have the hunger. I think hunger specifically that I'm talking about is the ability to get things done. So it's not about talking about all these ideas, which a lot of people love to do. Ultimately, I think the ideas are worthless until you're executing those ideas. The knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is power. And so when it comes to hunger specifically, I think the hunger to make things happen is going to be a huge invisible force that's going to determine your results. How hungry are you to get things done? How hungry are you to make things happen? How hungry are you to create the relationships and to go outsourcing and to spend that little extra time doing the thing that maybe not everybody else cares about? Because that's going to make the difference. Maybe not today, maybe not this week, maybe not this month, but I promise whether it's a year from today, whether it's a couple years from today, it ultimately separates you from everybody else. And that begins with the hunger, with the desire, with the drive and grit to get those things done. Hunger also extends to the curiosity for knowledge. This market and all business markets are constantly adapting and changing. And you can immediately spot people who are not adapting with the market, who are still operating on the same information they were 5 years ago. Now, a lot of that information may still be relevant. Even in my case, I'm still using gems that I learned 5 years ago. However, I've always aimed to maintain a learning mindset, a beginner's mindset, approaching each and every part of the business knowing that there's still room to improve, knowing that there's little tweaks here and there that I can make that can improve the overall system. The easiest way to understand this for me was to see my business as 1% improvements. If I can improve a little bit here, if I can improve a little bit there, over time, the overall system of my business will improve. And that ability to improve won't just 2x my results, it'll 10x my results, because almost everybody else is not doing that. And so maintaining that mindset of hunger for not only the execution side of things and getting things done, but also that hunger, that curiosity, that willingness to go out and seek new information. Maybe I do the research on the same thing that I've done the research on, 3-6 months ago. I'm constantly updating the mindset. I'm constantly updating the knowledge base so that it is relevant to today's market. And this is an ongoing journey. I'm constantly learning new things. I'm constantly sharing new information with others. And I'm also always having these conversations where I'm able to bounce these ideas back and forth, because that can be a super underrated way of learning as well. Having this hunger for new knowledge, having this hunger to execute on ideas, and ultimately having this hunger to understand that, okay, there's always going to be more to learn. So having this hunger for new knowledge and new curiosity, and taking that knowledge and immediately applying it, because you and I both know a whole lot of people that will just watch videos, that will just read the books, that will just talk about these things, but they're not actually doing anything with the information. And that's why I think I've become so free in terms of what I share in these videos, in terms of, the value that I seek to provide. It's realizing that, if information was enough, everybody would be millionaires with six-pack abs. So I've really got nothing to worry about in terms of, out of 1,000 people that watch my videos, there might only be one that really executes on the ideas. And even if there is more, maybe it is, 5 to 10 people, how many of those are going to stick around for a long period of time? And that's what really makes a difference. So when I make these videos, I'm making them for that one person who is going to take the information, put it into action, and it's going to turn into a really cool conversation, whether it's a year from today, whether it's 5 years, whether it's 10 years from today, where they're like, hey kiddo, look, I watched that one video of yours. I really appreciate what you said. And so that's really my goal. Ultimately, when it comes to hunger, they can copy the method, but they cannot copy the hustle. So even if two people have the same information, the character, the approach, the drive to put that information into action is going to be completely different. Person with hunger ultimately sees the problem as a puzzle and the obstacle as an opportunity. They don't let those temporary setbacks obstruct them from the North Star goal that they have. They see these temporary roadblocks as the opportunity to upskill, the opportunity to get better. When it comes to hunger, I don't think this is something that can be taught. I think this is something that comes from within. It's definitely intrinsic. When it comes to these three invisible forces, this one is the one that is going to make the biggest difference. But ultimately, I left hunger as the last invisible force because I think it is the most influential on your ability to shift reality. If you have this hunger and you apply it in a productive way, ultimately you cannot be stopped, because eventually all those no's are going to lead to the yes that catapults you into the next chapter where you do win, where all the work you put in beforehand does compound and does lead to that result that you ultimately want. So this was the three invisible forces that decide your reseller income. Thank you very much for your time and energy if you made it to this point in the video. I'm Kiddo, and I'll see you on the next one.